Now, finally, allow me to introduce today's speaker, Klaas Houfman. Klaas joined MVRDV in 2008 as an architect and was appointed a senior architect in 2017. He is a very strong conceptual designer, leading a wide variety of architectural and urban projects, but I'm going to leave it to him to share more about his work. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Klaas. What do you have in store for us today?
Yes, hi, hello. Thank you all for joining. I will talk a bit about this project today, Atelier Gardens in Berlin, Germany. I think it will show nicely how many of the things that we are working on at MVRDV are coming together at different scales. It's an urban project, urban regeneration project. We work on architecture, landscaping, transformation of monumental buildings, and the interiors. All in one project. And I will show you how we have worked on this at those different scales. Scale of the master plan that we started with, continuing the first ideas, realizing a transformation of Tone 1, Studio 1, and then finishing up with the transformation of House 1, the yellow building. But before that, maybe I should introduce quickly where I'm working at the moment. MVRDV stands for Maas van Rijs de Vries. These are the three founding partners, and they are still very actively involved in all of the projects that we do. But of course, we have a lot of colleagues working together to make it all happen. More than 300 people at the moment working in mostly in Rotterdam. Rotterdam is still the headquarters where most of the work and the design is done. But we have offices all over the world, in New York, in Paris, in Berlin, and in Shanghai, to help us with more of the local issues that should be arranged. We are quite well known, I would say, for our strong conceptual architectural projects, like this one, Hanover Pavilion in Germany, the Market Hall in Rotterdam, the Depot, and Museum Boijmans of Beuningen, special type of museum that reinvents the typology of the museum, opening up its archive rather than its front of house. And Valley, a mixed-use building, bringing new life to a kind of mostly monofunctional business district in Amsterdam. But next to that, we do a lot of other things. We do a lot of urban projects, interior projects. We have a special interior team, and we do a lot of teaching and research, and have a lot of publications about that. And also, maybe not known to everybody, we more and more work with transformation of existing conditions. I would say it's been in the DNA of MVRDV since the beginning, since we started. Also because we're based in Rotterdam. This is an image of Rotterdam just after the war, which was completely flattened out by the bombings and the fire. So we know in Rotterdam the value of history and the value and the kind of what you miss if you don't have this kind of historic sense of architecture in your center. And you appreciate somehow the building of the value of monumentality of later periods. So we value our buildings from the 50s and the 60s because that's how far our history goes back in terms of architecture. You can see it also in our office where we are housed. This is one of those post-war buildings in Rotterdam that we have transformed into our own MVRDV house. And at the same time customizing and giving it a new identity that really fits us, but also strengthens somehow the quality of the building. We have transformed this monumental building into a hotel in Amsterdam. These silos have turned into beautiful apartments around the silos rather than inside in Copenhagen. This is an addition to a family house in Rotterdam, building a new extension quite bluntly and with a lot of color on top. The renovation of the museum in Schiedam, again with a very colorful and contrasting intervention that doesn't obliterate the history but gives it a new context, I would say. We made this temporary installation a huge staircase, giving access to one of the most important post-war buildings in Rotterdam, and giving people again the opportunity to visit the roof, which is completely accessible, but not many people knew about it. So this staircase was somehow an advocate to look further than your streetscape and also discover what's up there. And a few years later, we did a similar intervention somewhere else in Rotterdam, giving access to the roof with this designed pathway and giving completely new perspective to the city as we know it. This is a retail project where combining the kind of monumental restrictions of the brick house and giving it a twist by turning the bricks into glass, which was a surprise for the Monumental Committee that they had no answer to. They could not kind of refuse to build it out of bricks made of glass. We added new buildings in concrete factories, respecting the existing conditions there, but at the same time bringing new life. We transformed a highway in Seoul into a park, and the shopping mall turned into a beautiful public space. And a former communist monument in Tirana became a public educational facility which everybody was allowed to use and occupy again. And then I end up with Atelier Gardens. As I said, many things come together here. We were invited by a client that wanted to transform a former film studio complex into a new campus for activists, how to say it, to create a new community for institutions that are working to improve conditions in any field in the world. That sounds very vague. It has been quite a challenge also to understand at one point what exactly the goal and the type of people and atmosphere they were looking for. But that was part of the whole process of a first urban regeneration investigation that we did. This site is located right at the edge of the Tempelhof Airport in Berlin. You can see here the Tempelhofer Feld, which is a former airfield that has been turned into one of the largest public spaces, urban public spaces in the world. And our site is right here on the left side. I don't know if you see my mouse, but it's divided from the airfield by a train track, so there's no access at the moment. And this project is hoping to be one of the instigators to reconsider, new connections also across the rail track to connect to this site and even beyond. You can see the site here below. And when we started, the site was looking like this, quite a diverse collection of buildings. The brick buildings that you see are very beautiful historic film studio buildings made out of brick. They are also protected, heritage protected, but there's many other buildings in between that had different qualities, and some of them were even quite ugly, I must say. And you can see almost all of the site was paved. So much paving and so many parked cars and vans that were needed for the operations of the film rental business. But transforming the uses of this site also allowed us to reconsider, the use of the public space. Some images from the early 20th century, when the first studio buildings were built. Interestingly, to learn that film studios at that time, when there were still silent movies, were made out of glass because they were really in need of the daylight for filming. You can see here the grandeur of those buildings that is still noticeable today. And the campus has a really big variety of atmospheres and types of spaces. These big buildings are accompanied by smaller buildings, and the larger open spaces are contrasted by these types of alleys in between. That was one of the qualities somehow that we recorded and wanted to kind of do something with later on. You can see how they used the site for a set building. And at the same time, we were also very much fond of this image that showed that it has a very nice green environment as well at that time, almost looking like a small village. But today, or when we started 5 years ago, most of that charm was gone. And that was the starting point for our vision for how to bring new life to this campus. And without going too deep into the whole master planning phase, we did a lot of studies, site visit analysis, etc., and came up at the same time with a couple of principles that helped us along the way to convince the clients on how to operate within all the unknowns of developing this site. Because there was no strict time frame, there was no strict program. We had to help them in a way, give them a kind of a structure that would help them to take decisions along the way rather than all up front. Some of these principles, for example, one of the first ones, quite easy to make, is that we really wanted to kind of respect the beauty of those big monumental film buildings, the film studio buildings. At the same time, also advocating to avoid demolishing anything, actually, for reasons, obvious reasons that we all know now today. But at that time, it needed some convincing. Demolishing buildings is not proper anymore. But that gives you new challenges, what to do with the buildings that are not so functional anymore and not so beautiful anymore. I will come back to that when I talk about House 1. The other easy conclusion was that we wanted to get rid of as much pavement as possible and give it back to nature. Let a landscape designer that was hired afterwards, Harris Buck from the UK, they did a great job to kind of follow the concept of step-by-step development and introducing their rewilding ideas for all types of landscape that would somehow creep in to this campus, work with what's there, use also materials that were available or would even become available during some of the transformations, and use that to build a new landscape. So what we basically did here, this existing plan transformed into a quite a diverse and green landscape in which different types of buildings of different sizes, different beauties would remain and would get a new function. And this could all be developed step by step. The client was able to pick which building they would be interested in first to develop, and then wait to see how that would go, and then move on to the next one. And the public space somehow would follow that idea. So this, in our vision, would be able to transform in something like this, which is still very diverse. It's more diverse, more green, also more colorful, as we always like to use color as an element of information, and maybe, to use your words, Hannah, joy. And this is one of the photos of already 2 years ago. So I can never give you a final end result because the project is still ongoing. There might still be a new project popping up sooner or later. But here you can see what already has happened and what kind of dramatic transformation has been achieved already in those 2-3 years since we started working on it. And to give this kind of freedom of development and also this kind of chaos of scale and program, some kind of structure, one of those principles for the entire master plan was also to give the communal entrance points that already existed in between the film studios, the colored blocks right here, to give them a clearly recognizable identity in terms of color. So those would be informing the color scheme of the surroundings right there. So it would be easy for people to navigate throughout the site to these different areas that each also would have their own types of users. And this color scheme, somehow, I'm of course going through it quite quickly and superficially, but this color scheme has been developed over time to reflect somehow, its quality for readability, but still have some kind of connection to nature, natural aspects. This is a picture of the existing situation of the tone 1 and tone 2 corner, with this glass addition, which was done in the 90s, I believe, in between, and our kind of impression of what the transformation could achieve, with including the transformation of the landscape, marking this kind of green entrance. And I will talk about tone 1 soon after, what we did there. And that's the other side of the campus, a lot of parking, a lot of pavement. You see house 1 that we transformed into the yellow house later here on the left. So quite anonymous everything, and our vision for what it in the end should look like, could look like. And this is one of the projects, one of those other entrance buildings that has not been realized yet. So that's one of those examples of projects that are still in the pipeline that one day might still pop up, or if they're not needed anymore, maybe they will never happen. But we had a whole variety of mini projects somehow in the pipeline to help the client achieve their goals. Some pictures of soon after finishing this master planning phase, how the transformation also quite quickly was started before we started doing any of the architectural interventions. So all the pavement that could be removed was soon piled up. This pavement is all being pulverized and being reused in the landscape as gravel or substrate for the plants that come in. Some of the trees you see already waiting to be planted. And some of the pictures, I don't have pictures of what it looks like now. I think this is 1 year ago, so I'm quite curious to see what it will look like next summer. Every year, nature will be more and more present. And at the same time, during this whole transformation, the operations of the campus and of Atelier Gardens was continuing as well. They are very active in programming some of the spaces around the campus, or even programming outdoor events, showing outdoor movies, organizing festivals, renting spaces out for commercials, filming, because filming is still one of the things happening on site in that studio building that you see over there, Studio 5. Then I move on to, how am I doing on time? The transformation of Tone 1. That's the first project, the first assignment where we could test our ideas on one of those monumental buildings. We couldn't touch any of the exterior or any of the kind of monumental value of the structure itself, but the client wished to be able to reuse that space in a much more flexible way, renting it out to different types of for different types of events. Being more flexible in the types of tenants that they could use. The building was not suitable anymore for any filming as a filming location, because the other Studio 5 was much bigger and much more equipped to do so. So we were kind of free to fill in potential use for this building. And that led us to kind of conclude quite quickly that we needed to kind of separate this project into two main focus points. So one project, important project, is the kind of renovation and the restoration of this existing building, including, redoing the installations, redoing the floor, all the things that were damaged and not functional anymore. But doing all of that in kind of in an invisible way, respecting the characteristics of the building as it was, and at the same time, on the second image, thinking about a way to occupy the space in such a way that it would add something new, something useful and functional, that will allow the space to transform without touching the building. So this first project, we worked really closely also with our local partner, HS Architects, Harold Hirschmüller-Schindler in Berlin. They helped us a lot on a lot of the technical work and the work on the monumental aspects. And we broke the building down, so to speak, into these different ingredients. And each of those ingredients would get a proper solution, an investigation, and then solution on how to deal with the restoration of it. You can see some pictures during construction. One of the biggest interventions we were allowed to do here was to build a skylight into the roof. That was allowed because it was kind of not visible from the street, but it's also quite crucial, and also in relation to the picture I showed you in the beginning, where daylight used to be quite an important factor for the characteristics of the film studio. Quite an important thing now to add also daylight for the possible uses inside, not being limited only to the black box. We placed in new doors, as transparent as possible, placed mirrors inside the entrance box so that daylight would be able to reflect even deeper into this space. We renewed the floor, but as you can see, most of the rest of the walls stayed intact and stayed also kind of raw and rough as we found it. Then, to anticipate the potential uses of this space, we also had to kind of think about the facilities that would be needed, additional spaces next to it that could be transformed, and like toilets and the canteen and the wardrobe and storage, etc. And this was done in this green area, and this is then the extension of that idea of turning this entrance marker, this kind of information meeting point, and using that color also to mark the communal spaces that would facilitate the studio building. Some pictures of the renovated entrance hall and the toilets, and the annex space that is next to the big studio space with new wardrobes inside. And then moving on to what to do with the building a flexible concept for different uses of this film studio space. We came up with the idea to design a massive rail structure that would hang in the space as a proud visible element, so not something purely functional hidden somewhere in the ceiling, but more like a spaceship that would be multifunctional, also integrating light and integrating multiple trajectories of where curtains would then be able to divide the space in many different ways. And these are some of the renders that we used to convince the client of this idea. You can see the blue rail system with all the curtains in different colors to also be able to make different rooms in different colors parked on the sides. And then so you can also use the big space in its most bare form. But as soon as you start to move the curtains, you are free to divide the space in any way that you want. You can divide it into smaller spaces, have multiple uses at the same time, because some of the curtains are also fully acoustic. Using the additional green space next to it to make the space bigger, introducing also these kind of tribunes, moving furniture to be able to have audiences move around. And the curtains, as you can see, each would have a different property, from being very thick and with the best acoustic value to being very transparent and lightweight to not close off too much. And these are the photos. This is a picture of the rail with the light and the skylight above. and the beauty of this kind of minimum intervention that allows so many different atmospheres inside. The different textures and fabrics that we used, and every day a possible different intervention that would fit the type of events. Too many pictures here. So, and what I really like about it as well is that it's very hidden. It's very enclosed by this heavy brick building, but these big doors, when they open up, they still reveal somehow this new life inside in the evening when you open the doors. That brings me to the second project that we were able to realize, and that's kind of a completely different nature. This is the building right next to the main entrance. Here on the left, this cube. It's an office building built in 1998, so it was not that old. So obviously we didn't want to kind of demolish it, even though there were a lot of functional problems. The client wanted to rent this out as office space, but it would not apply for proper use anymore, because the facade was the climate system was not good enough. The building was overheated in the summer. It was completely filled in with office cells and ugly lowered ceilings, and it needed a complete makeover. So again, we kind of investigated all the different ingredients of the building and different parts that would be able to improve those different aspects of the building. So the facades on south and west that would somehow need to improve the overheating, and the roof, by the way. Some of the facades that really needed to build a new identity for this building, because at the same time it would be standing next to the main entrance, and the client was desiring some kind of iconic statement to invite people into the campus, which is quite enclosed. And I didn't mention yet that there's a wall around the whole site, which is also one of its qualities, that it feels quite intimate once you step inside, but you need to make some effort to let people know that they can come in. So this building, that was one of the goals for this building, to be able to do that. And at the same time, on the right, this building was also quite enclosed towards the interior of the campus, and the client wanted to have a more public programming on the ground floor that would be able to open up to the future garden. So we came up with the idea to find a solution for all of these aspects in kind of local interventions in this building and on this building, and give all those new elements a yellow color, part of that color scheme I mentioned earlier. So a new core with a new elevator that would be able to go to the roof would all be yellow. The ground floor with the new meeting spaces and the cafe would be yellow, and a new rooftop pavilion to function as a kind of more public event space overlooking the whole Tempelhofer field and looking at the skyline of Berlin, as you will see later. And the roof garden, sitting in a roof garden that would insulate the roof. And then, because of the amount of people that would be allowed on the roof, required an extra fire escape, we came up with this idea of this quite expressive external staircase that would not just be a fire escape, but would function as a kind of public attraction point as well. I will come back to that later. This idea, I must be honest, that this idea of having quite a strong contrast between existing building remaining as it is and giving a yellow color to all the new elements was kind of doubted by the client if that would be strong enough, or maybe the building would still be ugly. So that made us led to finally, quite shortly before the construction, to decide that actually the whole building would be painted yellow. Maybe that can be some of your comments to see if you agree with that decision. So this is the result. It makes it quite uniform in that sense. So that's a good thing about it, I think. This is the ground floor as it was, and our proposal to kind of strip everything away that was not functional or not needed anymore, and then give it a new purpose with those new functions, with in terms of a cafe and meetings, co-working spaces. Some pictures of the lobby and the cafe. You can see that also the existing building has been polished up, but still the improvements remain visible. So it's not covered up where we kind of replastered the walls and etc. Same for the upper office floors that used to look like this, stripping them out completely and giving the tenants the opportunity to decide how much square meters they would need and how they would want the space to be divided up. And our local architect, HS Architect, for example, is one of the new tenants of this building. You can see them here. All of the materials that somehow had to be removed from the building have been collected and have been labeled and have been reused elsewhere on site. So some of these insulation materials have been used somewhere else. These tiles have been pulverized as well to be used in the landscape, etc. And then I come to this additional idea of there's quite a modest transformation of the building itself, but since this is the highest building on site, we thought it was a missed opportunity to not somehow occupy being able to access the rooftop of it. So it was not accessible before, and we convinced the client to let the public be able to enjoy this beautiful view. So we proposed this pavilion on top, sitting in this roof garden, and added this staircase. So this allowed also the kind of rooftop to become a public destination without interfering with the internal logistics of the building. The garden, of course, is not there yet, still has to grow, but I think it will be beautiful. But you can see this amazing view that you have from this pavilion. And the terrace in front of it, overlooking the Tempelhofer field. This is where you end up when you climb the stairs. A picture of the completely prefabricated CLT structure of the pavilion, lightweight. We were able to build it on top of the existing structure without any reinforcements. And the facade of this pavilion is able to open up completely to also have a connection between inside and outside. And then this zigzag staircase, as we call it, became quite an expressive element in the end. Something the client was kind of looking for to not only, fulfill its functional purpose of as a fire escape, but to also create this iconic piece of furniture landing in the middle of this future public space that is developing around it. So we used the minimum dimension. These are the minimum dimensions needed for the fire escape, and we kind of extended the width as much as possible to give more space for people to sit. We added a couple of small chairs and tables here and there, so people would actually be able to not use it only for going up and down, but also to sit and meet and relax. And the idea is that, you cannot see that now, but the idea is that this staircase in the end will really kind of meander through the different trees that when they are grown up, that you really kind of sink into this small forest somehow surrounding the staircase when you descend from them. Some people already found their favorite lunch spot. And in the evening it's illuminated. And this gives quite a nice, I must say, unexpected effect of this reflection of the shadows of the perforations on the facade itself. And here you can see one of the latest pictures of how the landscape designers are starting to construct the landscape around it. And a nice picture of people actually having fun and having a party on the rooftop. I think this is what I wanted to show you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Klaus, for all of this, for sharing all of the details about the project, but even going back to just kind of situating us within the firm's work. Was incredibly insightful to get to go through it step by step as well. Thank you. And for the record, the chat all agreed that it was a great decision to paint the outside, the entire exterior. To get our question and answer period started, I actually have my own quick question, which came up the way that you were describing using color as a signpost. And I was really struck by the different colors of material on the interior project that you showed. And I'm curious, when you go to select colors, what that process looks like, and if you kind of already have preset kind of ideas of what you want to signpost by choosing a specific color, or if it's very specific as well to the site, the context, what a color might feel or represent to you.
Yeah, color is actually a very touchy subject, also even within our office. I mean, there's a lot of science about color, but in the end, I believe it's also still a matter of taste. So we have projects in our office that have completely different kinds of color schemes, depending on the person who is making the decisions about the color. I would say quite an important aspect of choosing these colors has been the intuition of what this color specifically needed to do. So it was for us quite clear that choosing a color for this yellow building, for example, should be quite a bright and happy and sunny, inviting color. It should not be dark purple or dark green, or so it should somehow contrast with the existing colors, white and brown and green. Mm-hmm. But mostly this sunflower, sunny feeling somehow was one of the reasons why we picked that color. And you can say that's very superficial, but in the end, I don't have enough time to tell you how many workshops and how many participation processes we did with all of the potential tenants and the existing tenants, and so somehow this idea of color was also useful to activate somehow a response from these people on how important it is to do something to that building.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's something with art or writing or architecture. I think that the mark of success is when you make something look effortless, and it looks like this color was just kind of so perfect that I wouldn't have guessed that there's been so many meetings and consultations. But it makes sense when you say it, and that's a process I'd love to hear more about sometime. So before I continue with the next questions, I just want to remind anyone who's potentially interested in an event like this and participating in an event like this, well, we'd love to hear from you. You could just head over to the polls tab, which is directly below our chat box, and let us know if you want to be on our A+ Awards newsletter, which will be launching this October. And for the next question, we had one person ask, one second, here it is. Which factors you consider when selecting materials for adding or replacing elements in a building with historical value? How you approach that specification?
Yeah, I think this is, of course, I think as MVRDV we may have kind of a tendency to really look at the character of materials that would really supplement something to the existing building. Mm-hmm. And we usually talk about contrast, to contrast something raw, something rough with something smooth. So usually I would say we don't design things that blend in too easily. So that somehow points out what kind of direction of choice of materials or colors we prefer. But at the same time, when smoothness or integration is needed, for example, in the studio building, then of course you try to find something that matches. But then it's also aiming to kind of disappear and to kind of look effortless and blend in.
It was heartening to see that the materials that were taken out were recycled. I didn't know that about this project actually, and it's a pleasant surprise and something that I hope we see everywhere more and more often.
Yeah.
So our next question is from Stephanie, who asks, when you're developing diagrams, do you ever find that if one concept that you're pursuing isn't proving useful? And if so, for example, like you're hoping to find a lot of trees to keep, but then they're mostly dead or they're not going to survive the construction. What do you do with those findings, and how do you kind of pivot? What approaches do you take, I guess, when you hit a roadblock when you're developing a diagram?
Well, first of all, I would say diagrams are also always evolving. Yeah. So that's the easy answer. When we hit a dead end, we make a new diagram. But I'm just being very honest. But I must say, in this case, of course, the whole regenerative aspect of this project and the kind of open-endedness allowed us to kind of always make a detour when we hit something that was not possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could give another lecture about how many versions of this project we made and how many. I already told you about the pipeline of maybe 10 more projects within this site, transformations or new pavilions that we have dreamed about and that never happened and also will never happen. So in that sense, it was kind of a decision tree of all these projects for the client to be able to navigate their own wishes, but also their own business case on what would be a suitable trajectory for them.
Mm. And that's something that you then kind of continue in dialogue, of course, with the client. Yeah. And you said there was a lot of also consultations, for example, with the color. Yeah.
So maybe just to answer this question better, if it's an answer at all, but I think we always design much more, and we kind of anticipate much more than we know we can do. So there's always this kind of escape to a second option or an alternative.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So another question that I'm also curious about is, in the presentation, one of the goals on the diagram that you presented was connection. So this person is asking, Anna is asking, what do you think is architecture's role in creating a sense of place in urban settings? And maybe I would just kind of maybe modify the question a bit to also just ask like how you think about connection and approach creating connection and discussing it amongst your team.
And then you mean physical connection or like?
Yeah, I think connection, but I think you could also respond in the sense of with the urban setting, both connections,
Yeah.
Whether it's visual or it's creating gathering spaces, or how you guys talk about that word in general.
Yeah, well, connection I think is one of the most important aspects of any project, but it can be interpreted in many ways. That's why I was asking. So even this project, which was one of the discussions, should we open up this campus more? Should we tear down the wall? Do we want to kind of convince the client to build 3 bridges across the train track, etc.? In that discussion, we actually discovered that it's also a huge quality and a kind of act of connection to keep it secluded, to keep it kind of a secret garden, because that creates, especially if you then inside create special moments that people like to visit and see, that creates another type of connection that kind of draws people's interest in the site to discover it. You know what I mean? So that's why I think we always, MVRDV cannot make bland, boring buildings, because we want people to engage and somehow be excited or surprised about it. And that's a form of connection as well, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And generating a sense of excitement about the place is a form of connection to the place, I think. I see what you mean exactly. So we're nearing towards the end. So I have another question. I want to congratulate you and your team for winning in the Architecture Plus Renovation and the Architecture Plus Color categories of the A Plus Awards. And I want to ask how you feel about winning an A Plus award, how you feel it's beneficial for MVRDV, and highlighting the firm's work and all of the work you've put into this project. And also just to say congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's, of course, always nice to be recognized on something that you worked on for so long. MVRDV works on so many projects, and so many projects that even are more iconic and get a lot of global attention. And when we were working on this project, not many people, even within the office, knew about it, right? So it's a very sympathetic project that working with very small interventions. I didn't even talk about the interior design in much detail, but there's a lot of kind of hidden qualities in here that don't scream out loud like this is award-winning architecture that we're trying to do. So in that sense, it's really nice to be recognized for also these types of projects, I would say.
I completely agree. At the end of the day, these are projects that touch so many people, and I think that hold a lot of lessons that we could learn in the wider architectural field as well. So thank you so much. And I just want to thank you for your brilliant presentation and for all of your responses to the questions. I always follow MVRDV's work closely, and it's exciting to get insight into this project, and I'm looking ahead to following future projects as they finish up. As I mentioned before, there's a poll up right now, so anyone who wants to sign up for our mailing list, you can feel free to head down there. And for anyone interested, we have another talk coming up in a couple of hours at 3 p.m. Eastern time, so in 1 hour from now. And it's going to be with Nicola Scarinaro from Foster & Partners, who's going to be exploring how the firm tackles complex urban and sustainability challenges. So thank you so much again, class, and thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you all again soon.
Bye. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.